And this is our show.
What if it really works?
A practical guide to spirituality. Karen, where are we and who are we looking at?
We are sitting on top of a very high mountain in Virginia, and we are talking to Georgia Pearson. And she's a very, very special being. And we are honored to be here in her home today. Thank you, Georgia, for inviting us to be here.
You're welcome.
Thank you. We know that you are able to communicate in many ways, in many forms, with many beings. So will you tell us a little bit about the work that you do and the communications that you receive?
Yes. Well, I've been communicating with some extraterrestrial beings for a little over 8 years. And they are here communicating, attempting to help us earthlings with our world and giving us some ideas on how we can develop spiritually, help ourselves personally, and help our world, and even help worlds beyond the earth, since they're all connected.
So what do you call these beings with whom you communicate?
I call them the ones, but they actually have no name. And there's a story that goes with that.
Well, please share it with our viewers.
We came to the Monroe Institute for a Gateway program in 1985. And in the middle of the night, a couple of nights, we saw some, I guess you would call them orbs, very large basketball size, bright white lights hanging out over the field behind the center. They weren't moving, they were just stationary, maybe 3 rows up. Occasionally they'd wink off, and maybe 100 of them, many. At that time, we were in something of a spaced out state, and it just seemed like another unusual experience that we were having. I didn't think to attempt to communicate. I didn't think to take a photograph. I didn't think to do anything. I just stared. Then, during one of the last sessions of our gateway, Bob Monroe said that we were going to connect with some beings that were very special in our lives. And when I did that, I connected to these beings, and I had this extraordinary feeling of unconditional love. It was just overpowering, and I felt this strong sense of reconnecting. And then he said, now you have to come back. And then it was this excruciating pain of separating all over again. And I always wondered, who were these beings? What were these orbs? What was I connecting with? I moved here near the Monroe Institute in 1987. And I always, in the middle of the night, if I was up, looked over at the Institute to see if I saw those lights anymore. But I never did see them again. 8.5 years ago, when I connected with these beings, I asked them if they were the ones that I had encountered during my Gateway program. And they said yes. And then I asked them, well, what shall I call you? And they said, well, we don't have a name, but you can call us the Ones. And that was kind of a joke, because that's what I had called them. And so that's what I continue to call them. But they say that their identity is really connected with their energy, not with a name. Although a name is a convenience to use in conversation.
So would you like to share with us some of the information that they have given us in order to make this world a better place?
Yes, I would. But perhaps I should start a little bit earlier in how this connection happened.
Okay.
We had a flying saucer crossing sign set up by our mailbox, which you probably saw when you drove in, because we had gotten very interested in extraterrestrial beings when we moved here. It seemed to be a passion for us to find out as much as we could. We really hadn't known that much before we moved here. And so we studied channeled information, we studied various beings who had personal contacts with extraterrestrials. We traveled to Switzerland, to Billy Meyer's farm, and did many other things to familiarize ourselves with extraterrestrial beings. Well, in 1987, a new neighbor moved in. Her name was, and is, Lisette Larkins. She's written a few books about contacting extraterrestrials. She was in the process of writing her first book at that time, and when she saw our flying saucer crossing sign, she was quite surprised, and we became acquainted. And she said she wanted to test out some information about how to connect to extraterrestrial beings, how to telepathically communicate with them. But she felt she wanted to do something similar to Betty Crocker, which would be to test the information she'd been given. And I said, well, we had a group that met here every month, and she could come and teach us this process. So she did. And the first session that we did, I felt that my left analytical mind was very attentive to everything she told us to do, partly to relax, to use this music that she was playing to get us into a meditative state, to listen to very faint messages, that it was very quiet, very subtle, what we would be looking for. And we would set an intent to communicate with extraterrestrial beings. I set my intent to communicate with those who would be for my upliftment, for the best benefit of all, and went through the process with her. But I was very analytical about the whole thing. And while some others seemed to be getting some kind of contacts and experiences, I didn't. Now, the second time she came, a month later, I relaxed because I knew the routine and I didn't have to think about that anymore. And everyone else seemed to be pretty relaxed too. She had asked us if we got something to raise our hand, because of course we had our eyes shut, and then she would call on us to share whatever it is we think we received as a message. And at this session, people seemed more quiet and didn't seem to be getting anything, and Lisette said, well, act as if you're getting something, and then share that. And a friend of mine started participating and sharing various sensations he was having, and went on, and as I was listening to him, a question formed in my mind. And the question was, what am I perceiving that is subtle? And after I asked that question in my mind, I started hearing these words very, very faintly. They were so faint, I didn't think anybody could hear such a thing. They were just so faint. And they were very short sentences, and such as, we are here, it is working, keep going. And I raised my hand, and my friend kept talking, and I was hoping that I could remember what they were saying. And finally, Lisette called on me, and I shared these few sentences. I really had no idea if I had connected to anybody or not, but I was hearing these words in an unusual way. And then she said, "Is there more?" And they gave me a few more comments, and that was the beginning